The distress call was faint, the voice straining to rise above static and storm. Severe weather, position, then a burst of static drowned it out. A few minutes later, another fragment crackled across the airwaves. Heavy seas, damage. Operators scribbled frantically, trying to piece together words that broke apart in the static. Then silence. No coordinates, no clarity. Only a ship's name, carried faintly through the gale. MS München. And then nothing more. The München was supposed to be invincible. Built in 1972, she was the pride of the German merchant fleet, a LASH carrier nearly 260 meters long and capable of carrying heavy cargo across oceans with ease. She was equipped with the latest navigation and communication technology, the kind of ship magazines described as proof of West Germany's engineering prowess. She had weathered Atlantic crossings before, and her crew of 28 was experienced, steady, and proud. When she left Bremerhaven on December 7, 1978, bound for Savannah, Georgia, there was nothing unusual about the voyage. It was routine. But the Atlantic in December has always been unpredictable. The first days passed quietly. The München steamed westward at 16 knots, her bow slicing through gray seas, her engines humming steadily. In letters and calls home, her crew described normal weather and a smooth run. But within days, the ocean began to change. A low-pressure system formed and deepened, drawing cold Arctic air down across the ocean. By December 11th, the system had exploded into a massive winter storm, with hurricane-force winds and waves as tall as buildings. The München sailed straight into its teeth. On the night of December 12th, fragments of the ship's mayday calls pierced the storm. Multiple radio stations caught pieces of transmissions, but none lasted long. The words were always broken, barely audible admissions of damage, stress, desperation. At 3:25 a.m. on December 13th, the last call came. Then the Atlantic fell silent. The alarm spread quickly. The München was one of the strongest ships afloat, but she was now unaccounted for in one of the fiercest storms in years. Within hours, West Germany coordinated with NATO allies to launch a massive search. Merchant ships diverted from their routes, U.S. Coast Guard aircraft took to the skies, and German naval forces pushed into the storm. It would become one of the largest maritime searches of the 20th century. For days, the search continued. Aircraft flew low over raging seas, their crews straining to spot anything against the endless gray. Ships beat into headwinds that ripped spray from the waves and flung it across their decks. Everyone hoped for rafts, for survivors, for even a flare. What they found instead were fragments. A lifeboat, twisted and shattered, its davits, the steel arms meant to lower it, still locked, proving it had been torn away by sheer force rather than launched by the crew. Another was discovered later, equally destroyed. Life jackets floated by the dozens, some marked with the München's name. Cargo debris scattered in the swells. But no bodies, no survivors, no sign of the great ship herself. The ocean had consumed her completely. Investigators were disturbed by what the wreckage revealed. The lifeboat davits were bent forward, not backward as they should have been in a normal storm. It was as if some unimaginable wall of water had slammed directly into the ship's bow, bending thick steel like wire. The force required was beyond anything conventional storm waves could explain. The conclusion was chilling. The München had likely encountered a rogue wave. For centuries, sailors had told stories of freak waves, monsters that rose out of nowhere, towering higher than masts, capable of breaking ships in half. Scientists dismissed the accounts as exaggerations. But the München's fate forced a re-examination. The evidence fit too perfectly. A single wave, perhaps 25 meters or higher, crashing across her decks, smashing lifeboats, flooding compartments, and crippling the ship so quickly that the crew had no chance to respond. It would explain the fractured Mayday calls, The sudden silence, the lack of any launched lifeboats. For the families back in Germany, the waiting was agony. Wives clutched photographs, parents kept radios on at all hours, and children asked when their fathers would come home. Christmas arrived with no answers. By New Year's, hope was gone. 28 men had vanished without a trace. The Atlantic had given back only lifeboats and life jackets, cruel tokens of lives extinguished. In the aftermath, memorial services were held in Bremerhaven and Hamburg, churches filled with grieving families and shipmates who could barely comprehend the loss. The München had been considered unsinkable, yet she had disappeared in hours. For the German merchant fleet, it was a wound that cut deep into national pride. For maritime science, it was a turning point. Within a decade, evidence from oil rigs and satellite imaging confirmed that rogue waves were not myth, but fact. Instruments recorded walls of water rising 30 meters or more, appearing without warning even in open seas. What had once been seamen's tales became scientific reality. The story of the München was recast as the most famous victim of a phenomenon the world had denied for too long. The tragedy reshaped maritime engineering. Ship designs were reevaluated, bridge windows strengthened, hulls reinforced, and storm navigation protocols revised. Mariners were warned to expect the unexpected, not only the long rolling swells of storms, but single massive waves that could rise like giants from the deep. The loss of the München, though devastating, saved countless others by forcing the industry to recognize what was possible. Yet mystery still clings to her story. Somewhere in the mid-Atlantic abyss, her wreck lies hidden. Sonar surveys have never located her. No one knows the exact sequence of her final moments. Did a rogue wave smash her bow, flood her holds, and snap her spine? Did she stagger on for a few minutes before rolling under? Or did she vanish in one instant, sucked into the trough of a wave so tall it blotted out the stars? What is certain is that the men on board faced terror few can imagine. In those last moments, they would have been fighting not only the storm, but the weight of the ocean itself, as steel screamed and water poured in faster than pumps could manage. Their last words, carried in fragments over the radio, are all that remain. And then the silence. Today, the München is remembered each December. In German seafaring towns, her name is read alongside others lost at sea. For the families, the grief never truly faded. No graves exist, only the sea itself. For sailors crossing the Atlantic, her fate is a caution whispered at the horizon, that the ocean is never conquered, that its power waits beyond charts and calculations. The München's end remains both a tragedy and a warning. Even the strongest ships can be humbled. Even modern steel can vanish in minutes. And the ocean, with its rogue waves and black storms, holds dominion still. Thank you for listening to The Sunken Ledger. Subscribe for more true stories from the depths.